Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Hadaway, and I'm the director for the Missouri Department of Economic Development. In today's afternoon session, we're shifting away from an education around nuclear energy and the myths about it per se, and focusing specifically on the energy demands. And today's panel, which I'm really excited, and I'll introduce them, but they're gonna go in a little bit more intros on what they do and what they touch, specifically talks about that demand and what we're seeing as far as demand in Missouri. And specifically, one of the things we wanted to focus on was around economic development and what's needed in order for Missouri to stay competitive around economic development. So Mason is with MISO here, and he's gonna go over a little bit about his background, what they do, and then Subhash Alias is the CEO of Missouri Partnership. Missouri Partnerships, he'll go into this too, but we partner with Missouri Partnership and they do all of the attraction, new business into Missouri. And then Steve Etcher is a fabulous, wonderful local economic developer in Warren and Montgomery County, and he'll talk about this too. But we lean on all of these partners around in order to make sure we're meeting the demand the businesses tell us that we need. And then how do we make sure we're getting that to demand to be able to grow Missouri and move Missouri forward, specifically around economic development. So with that, I'm gonna hand it to Mason, and he'll go through his intro and a little bit about what you do.
No, so thank you, Michelle, for moderating this panel and for the other panelists here. But happy to be here on behalf of MISO, which is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. And a little bit about MISO for those in the room who might not be familiar. We are a regional transmission organization and also independent system operator, really across the middle of the United States here. And we have a 15-state footprint that also includes the province of Manitoba, Canada, and also the city of New Orleans, which is its own kind of separate, distinct entity in the south. We have over 77,000 miles of transmission line that we operate in the interstate transmission system, the bulk power supply grid. And we have over 550 market participants that participate in our markets that we do operate across that footprint as well. So we are an independent, not-for-profit, member-based organization responsible for keeping the power flowing across that regional footprint. We are divided into the north, the central, and the south across that footprint, and I have responsibility for the states of Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Missouri, and Kentucky. And so our role as a grid operator, just to level set, is similar to that as an air traffic controller. We don't own the generation assets, we don't own the wires, but we do control the power flow across those facilities to keep the lights on for over 45 million Americans that live within the geographical footprint. And similar to air traffic controllers, of course, we don't own the planes, the runways, or the terminals, similar to the generation assets and the wires. And so to operate the grid, we do forecast demand, we monitor generation, we administer markets for the efficient and economical dispatch for affordability standpoint of generation assets, and then we also monitor the transmission system. So here on this slide here, you can see our responsibility from really generation or storage, really the utility scale type power generation sources, all the way through the bulk power supply transmission system. It does have kind of a line, if you will, when the distribution system with your local utility then takes over. So, similar to like if you look out your windows and see power lines, those are not necessarily under our functional control. And so MISO operates under the reliability imperative. It's really our guiding document that is our philosophical approach to business aspects. It's broken out into 4 different categories. We have our market strategy, our transmission planning, our operations itself, and then also a system enhancements where we're always looking for the latest and greatest on how to operate the grid efficiently. And so today, for this panel, large load forecasting, it's a great opportunity to talk about this. It is the hot topic, if you will, in our stakeholder process currently. In fact, coming up here on the 25th, we have a futures redesign workshop. And what that is truly looking at is the grid of the future. What does large load additions mean? What does transmission expansion process look like in order to meet and reliably serve those load additions while also maintaining reliability of the rest of the grid itself? And so what you're looking at here is really a snapshot of what we see for load growth across the MISO footprint. And this is based on information gleaned from our member utilities. So think about that as Evergy or Ameren here locally in Missouri. But as you can see, one of our largest, with level of certainty that we see coming up here is not only the addition of EVs, electrical vehicles and other sources onto the grid, but really the explosive growth of data centers themselves. And so with that projected load growth, which we really haven't seen for decades, it's going to require new additional firm, dispatchable, and controllable resources to maintain the reliability of the grid system. And so MISO relies on our member utilities or power producers and generators, their load forecasts to really get a sense of the size and scale of the addition that we're seeing. In some states, that's through an integrated resource planning exercise. In other states that doesn't have that, that's from the member utilities themselves. And what we're seeing is a rising trend towards the high end of our projected range of what we think that we'll see. And so it's with continued diligence that we work through our stakeholder process to best understand where that load additions are coming on into the footprint geographically so we can ensure power flows adequately across the region. Some of the things that we see as the portfolio evolves across the generation fleet for our members is that operational risks from a grid operator standpoint do become more profound and occur more frequently, but in unusual or not what we're used to scenarios. And so I've broken it out here into three different scenarios that we watch with the greatest concern, if you will. And the first one being just hourly wind output. We're seeing a lot of renewable generation growth, and we are prepared to rise to the occasion to manage that intermittent resource adequately. But what we're seeing is, there are certain days of wind output where essentially we will have a wind desert, if you will. There's just no wind output. And that becomes a concern from an operations standpoint to make sure that we do have resources available to dispatch should the wind not blow. And similarly, we're seeing a shifting net load shape, a duck curve, if you will, for solar. As solar comes online, and we're seeing, I believe it's about a 16 gigawatt growth of solar across our footprint, that our ramp needs are really shifting to the early evening and middle of the night from an operations standpoint. And so you can see here also the system stability challenges just with the frequency of high wind output on days where it's really windy and just managing those assets, especially the inverter-based resources. And so I won't go through everything on this slide, but I do want to let you know that MISO has been taking action through our reliability imperative as our guiding principles and pillars, but specifically these are ways that we are addressing those resource adequacy concerns that we're seeing as the grid operator. But there is more to be done, and we do that in partnership with our states across the footprint. They have primacy on resource adequacy. So we have a great partnership with our organization of MISO states, a great working relationship with the Missouri Public Utility or Public Service Commission here in the state. I know I'll be back next week with Southwest Power Pool presenting on our quarterly updates with them. So I'll be back to Missouri next week. One thing I do want to highlight too, this is very probably on the radar of a lot of developers looking to come to various geographical or state regions is that our queue remains backlogged at MISO. And the queue is, how do we get those generation resources studied and online to the transmission system to be able to move that power? And FERC has ordered the RTOs to get their queues cleaned up, to get down to a 1-year processing timeline, and MISO remains committed to getting that accomplished. What this shows is some of the breakdown of the generation assets that we're seeing wanting to come online and the various stages that they're in. So waiting projects are where we've completed our studies. They signed a generation interconnection agreement, and they're just not online yet. But they're still within their window of when they said they'd come online. Under delayed projects, that is over 31 gigawatts worth of delays. And that can be everything from supply chain disruptions to siting or permitting, or just, there's a plethora of different categories that plays into that, where we're not seeing the generation assets come online even after we've completed our processes at the RTO. I do want to put in a plug. If you're interested in any of these aspects, we have an amazing website that shows our real market time display, what the wholesale price is at individual node locations across the footprint, and you can see what the price of energy is going for. That's on our website, but also on our app. I know when I was getting ready to come onto this panel, the app actually pushed out a notification for me. We're in a hot weather alert, which is not surprising, but also a conserve operations standpoint. So if you're ever interested in how the grid responds to some of these larger weather systems that do occur, I would just encourage everyone here to download that. It's a great way to stay kind of connected, if you will, and demystify what we do at MISO. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mason, thank you. Welcome to Missouri for the hot weather alert. And we look forward to you coming back next week. We will have another hot weather alert, by the way. So, Subash, it's really interesting because as Mason talked about, and what I love is it's showing multiple states and the impact in it. But today we're focusing on why Missouri, why now? So give everybody a little bit of an intro on what you do, what does Missouri Partnership do, and then what you're finding with attraction projects and large utility needs.
Okay, thank you, Director Hadaway. So just a quick intro to our organization. We're a public-private nonprofit economic development group, and Director Hadaway's organization is our public sector partner at Missouri DED, and the Hawthorne Foundation is our private sector partner. So we really do one thing, and that is business attraction. So everything in this upper right-hand quadrant of activity is what Missouri Partnership does. Startups, expansion, retention stays within the Department of Economic Development. I would argue that's where the bulk of job creation comes from, but we are focused only on attraction. So everything that I share is going to be with that attraction lens. Now there's a different strategy on each type of these type of projects, but we focus strictly on attraction. And I want to give you just a very quick intro to what some of the challenges we have in general with attraction, and then some of the things that we're actually seeing here in Missouri. So the thing that we keep in mind when it comes to attraction is that companies are not looking to select Missouri. They're looking to eliminate Missouri. And they're looking to eliminate all the other states until they find the right location. So our objective is to stay alive as long as we can in this elimination process. So if you think about it, 50 states, 300 metropolitan areas, countless cities, companies are eliminating regions and states quickly based on certain factors. If you have what they're looking for, that doesn't mean that you're going to advance. It just means that you may not get eliminated. So this is the key point for us. So we go through this whole process of trying to stay alive in this industry. So what companies are looking for, there are multiple factors. Location, right? Just physically, where are we? We're in the middle of the country. We do well for companies that have that as a factor for them being located in the center of the country. What we're talking about today, infrastructure, electric utility infrastructure, but also roads, bridges, water, sewer, air access, all that's part of infrastructure. Workforce, getting the right people with the right skills, at the right cost. And not just who's there today, but who's there tomorrow. These are 20, 30-year decisions, and they want to make sure that the talent is there in the future. Soft infrastructure, kind of a nebulous term. This is maybe like similar companies, maybe key suppliers or key customers, or Dr. Choi referenced a fantastic bit of soft infrastructure, and that's MER. So these kind of unique assets, those are things like soft infrastructure. So companies will key in on things like that. The business environment, you heard Governor Kehoe kick off the conference today. Pro-business state, low taxes, financial incentives, all that's part of our business environment. And then quality of life, why we like to live here in the state. So when we approach companies, and when companies are looking at states, they're going to factor different points, and they're going to weigh and score these factors based on the type of operation that they are. So distribution centers, we do a lot of distribution center work, and they're going to focus on location. You can't out workforce or out infrastructure a bad location for a distribution center. What we have been seeing is you see these two large gold bars, and that's infrastructure. And manufacturing, so manufacturing always was keyed on infrastructure. We are seeing it becoming even more important when we talk about electric utility access. Data centers, we didn't even have this in our slide deck until recently. Data centers are all about utility infrastructure, and then workforce is important too. This is meant to just be illustrative when it comes to how companies are viewing us. So this is the overall what we do when we have our strategy related to attracting companies. So not unlike Mason's figure in talking about electric usage, but we are also seeing CapEx or capital investment projects climb. So in 2022, it was about $500 million in CapEx is what we were seeing. That has swelled up to $3.5 billion in CapEx. And so what that means is that's going to be equipment that goes in data centers, that's the construction for data centers, but it's also the equipment that goes in manufacturing. And even distribution centers are becoming more and more automated, and all of this means that they're using even more and more power than before. So we talked a lot about data centers, and that we know that they're big power users, but I also want to really hit the point home that these manufacturers are also really, really big power users. So here's an example of a handful of our top active projects that are in our pipeline. These are in varying stages. Some of them we opened maybe as recently as yesterday, and some of them we've been working on for a couple years. But you can see in that right-hand column, 68 megawatts, 400 megawatts, 100 megawatts, 120 megawatts, and total of 205 by 2035, or 90 megawatts by 2028. These are extraordinary figures by manufacturing standards, and these are figures that were frankly data center figures maybe 3 years ago, and now they're becoming manufacturing figures. And so we're kind of seeing this data centers are climbing, and then so is manufacturing when it comes to their demand. And you can see there's a tremendous amount of job creation that's part of this. So again, this is loads without data centers. If we added data centers in there, it would be 10x what we're sharing right now. So there's a group called the Site Selectors Guild, and they do a deep analysis, and they work with clients, and they advise their clients on how to locate facilities strategically. And so they did a recent study, and they were polling their clients on what is a key factor. Electric power capacity has become the top factor in their study from last year, from 2024. The second to highest factor is access to development-ready sites. That's something that we have been talking about for at least 5 years. Access to talent, these are all things that are really crucial, and then it kind of goes down. But electric power capacity, this is not something that was really on our radar until somewhat recently. And so my last slide is just sort of this, we've got this kind of exclamation point of what's going on, what we're seeing, right? It's this race to resources, and I know everybody here sees it. But a few years ago, we saw these data centers were racing each other to try to get the power. And then there were developers racing other data centers to get in the power. But what we're struggling with is we have now data centers and manufacturers both trying to go after the same power. And the data centers are moving incredibly fast. These companies have done them many times before, it's almost like they can copy and paste these across the country, and they could do that in Missouri. It's kind of our time right now. We're seeing a tremendous amount of this activity. But the manufacturers, they don't move as quickly. Manufacturers might put a big plant once a decade or once every 20 years. And so that's what we're seeing right now, is this sort of competition for the same power between manufacturers and data centers. And what's interesting is we're working on the same ones. We're working on the data centers and the manufacturers. So at any rate, I'd encourage you to take a look at our website if you want to learn more about Missouri. It's a phenomenal place to do business, and we can talk more about that. But thank you, Michelle.
Yep. Thank you, Subhash. And we'll get a little bit more into the questions on this. So we might revisit some of Subhash's slides here, because I know it was quick. I know it was a lot of information, but we'll dig in a little bit. Steve Etcher, amazing local partner we lean on all the time. What you're doing in Warren and Montgomery County, I wish I could replicate you all across the state, and I've told you that before. And kind of how this process works is we have a site consultant or a company that might come to DED or come to Missouri Partnership. And then from there, we reach out to our local partners and say, do you have the criteria that's necessary in order for us to submit a site to Missouri? So explain, as a local economic developer partnering with us, because economic development is all about team sport, what you do and how you work these projects.
Thank you, Director Hadaway. I don't know that I can explain what I do, because I haven't figured that out to my parents yet. But I'm in an interesting position, because I get to work with so many different levels of government, different partners across the state and across the industries. But my official title is I'm the manager of our location strategies practice at Marks Nelson Advisors. Marks Nelson is a business advisory firm based in Kansas City. But what makes it really unique for me is I get to see both sides of the coin. Our practice area specializes in both site selection and economic development. And for those that may not be familiar with that terminology, I'll break it down as simple as I can. Site selection is when we work with companies that are looking to grow. They're looking for a new location, or they need to expand their existing location. They're going out there trying to evaluate what is the most cost-effective and advantageous location for them to leverage. Economic development is when we are engaging with local communities and regional organizations to prepare their communities to not only accommodate but compete well and win these CapEx projects and these referrals that we're getting all the time from other site selectors across the country, across the globe. And both of those perspectives deal with the demand for energy. And I'll talk just briefly kind of about both one of those practice areas are doing and what we've seen kind of transitioning as we get into that. But I'll start with the site selection piece. And this is where we are working with companies that are clients of the firm looking for an expansion. And as Subhash said, there's a number of criteria that a company will evaluate before they pick a decision or make a decision on where they're going to go. It may be the workforce availability, it may be infrastructure availability, it may be cost issues, it may be tax burden. Energy has always been part of that conversation. But what we have seen is the conversation around energy has moved between the elements over the career that I've had. Initially starting in economic development, the conversations around energy was all about the reasonableness of the rates. How cheap can we get the power? What's it going to cost compared to our neighboring states? Or, how is our investor-owned utilities or cooperatives pricing compared to the Tennessee Valley Authority? Rates was the primary part of the conversation. Of course, reliability is important. It's kind of almost assumed anymore that it's reliable, but the degree of reliability continues to ratchet up for the types of businesses that we're working on and working with. About 10 years ago, the conversation around energy really started shifting towards renewables. In fact, our strategy was to go out there and help cultivate investment in renewable energy to be able to meet the demand of the industry. And we've seen that kind of shifting pretty dramatically over that decade. It was go, all renewables, it was go green, then it was go clean. Now it's more carbon neutral. So even that composition of the energy blend is shifting based on what the market needs because of just the demand on the system. And then, of course, if every time there's a major disaster, the conversation pivots to, well, how resilient is your grid? Every time there's a hurricane or there's a tornado, resiliency kind of jumps to the top. But that kind of finds its own even keel over time. But lately, the two things that we are seeing as really key drivers is how ready is your system? How quickly can we get the amount of power that we have? And if your answer is, 2 to 3 years, we can compete on that framework right now. If your answer is a decade, we've lost. We are eliminated as Sabah Shed because we cannot meet their primary demand for energy consumption. So that readiness component of our power infrastructure really drives economic development, as does the robust nature of our system. A company may come in today and say, I need 25 or 50 megawatts of power, but in 5 years, we want to be able to double our facilities or triple our facilities. Is there a robust system there that can make sure that their present needs are met and their future demands can be met as well? And so we see this shifting all the time, but with the emergence of data centers, the size and robust capacity is top of mind to everybody, followed quickly by the readiness of our system to accommodate it. So that's kind of what we're seeing in the energy specter around site selection. Around economic development, energy is paramount to what we do. And the demand for energy has really shifted in the past 3 to 5 years, exponentially shifted away from we need 5 megawatts to 10 megawatts to we need 500 to a gig. So we see that continually being an issue, and local economic development organizations need to embrace this change and capitalize on this opportunity to position their communities in Missouri to be a winner in this economic development strategy. One of the clients that we work with, and Director Hadaway referenced it, is Warren and Montgomery counties on the eastern side of the state of Missouri along I-70. In Montgomery County, we've actually advanced one of my passion projects that I've been really pushing hard for several years, and that is to create an industrial mega site for the state of Missouri so we can compete against some of the southeast states that have thousands and thousands of acres available for economic development, for large OEM plants, et cetera. I felt there was a void in Missouri for that product, and so we have been master planning a 5,000-acre mega site industrial park in Montgomery County. And you may say, well, why Montgomery County? And the answer is on the border there. Very simple. We built our plan around 2 of Missouri's key infrastructure assets. One is our incredible transportation network, and the second is that robust electrical capacity that's in this corridor. In fact, it is so robust, that's the highlight of our graphic in the middle of our slide there. It is the power and the transmission or transportation assets that will make this community successful and able to win these projects that the state is competing for. So, thank you.
Yep, Steve, we're gonna tell a little secret on you, right? We joke in economic development, we call this mega site Etcherland, because it is so robust and something we are so proud to sell. So again, from the vision of what you've been able to put together is phenomenal, and we consider it a huge asset in the state of Missouri. And you're absolutely right, because when you envisioned this years ago, while you knew where power was going, to the speed of how quickly the need for power is, you were on the cutting edge to make sure that Missouri is able to compete. So, okay, let's get into some of our Q&A portion here, okay? So Mason, really interesting, especially as you talk about the backlog and where you guys are with that. What I found is that on some of those pie charts, that is what one project Subash is currently working on, right? So as an independent system operator, it seems like a lot of your job is about forecasting and planning for future electricity demand. What are some things that you guys are doing to plan for the future grid changes?
Yeah, no, great question. And it seems like when I joined MISO, but in a previous life, I was actually legislative liaison at the Iowa Utilities Commission for 3 years. And so explaining this to our legislative friends, our governor's office, our congressional delegation on, what is the outlook for grid expansion in Iowa? And a lot of that revolves around RTO planning processes. So within Missouri, but also the greater footprint, we have our annual MTEP cycles, where projects are being submitted to resolve either congestion or constraints that local utilities are seeing across load-serving entities or what we're seeing. And as an outgrowth from that, our annual MTEP cycle, which is the MISO Transmission Expansion Plan, came about a need for even a larger system, one that could, span almost the entire geographical footprint, if you will. And so started to look, and this is prior to my arrival, but started to look at long-range transmission plan, or LRTP, and we broke that out initially into a tranche 1, a tranche 2, a tranche 3, and a tranche 4, routed those through our stakeholder processes. Today, we have gotten through tranche 1, and a lot of those proceedings have finished up in a majority of our commissions to be able to do the siting required for those really large lines. And we just finished up last December on 2.1, and that is to really build out a 765 kV line system, a backbone infrastructure there. There's some of the largest transmission lines available to really unleash that capacity need across the many states. And so as an outgrowth from MTEP came the LRTP with this greater need to move energy, especially as we've seen those generation resources not be located next to your traditional urban centers, the coal facilities. We're seeing obviously large utility scale wind farms and solar, which are in the more rural areas. And so it's the need to move that generation and that energy from the rural to the actual load centers. And so that is what we're currently paused on. We are working on a futures redesign, which is our outlook. So essentially our load forecasting, what we're seeing on the horizon that will really drive, states' approval of utility infrastructure plans, build out of their infrastructure, and then in return, through the RTO planning process. And so I think I mentioned this. We have a workshop actually next Friday on this exact thing. So you're seeing really the outgrowth of expansion planning in a transmission capacity from the RTOs almost go on steroids. So that is what we're doing at MISO to help facilitate future energy needs to get the electricity where it's needed most.
Again, it's a team sport, right? I also love that you guys use just as many acronyms as we do within state government and within economic development. So Steve, when you get one of these requests from DED or Missouri Partnership for a project with large electrical needs, what do you think from a local economic developer?
Well, there was a lot of discussion this morning about pop culture and movies, so my mind immediately goes to Dr. Emmett Brown and Back to the Future and ask myself, 1.21 gigawatts of power, how am I going to create that? But once I get past that, I really ask myself two questions. One, does this business opportunity align with our economic development strategy? And if it does, what do I have to do to win it? I'm not in the game to play the game. I'm in the game to win the game. And so to win those games when those large projects come in, the very first thing I do is I reach out to my utility providers and say, how do we work together to do this? We know what the traditional answer is, but we need the exceptional answer to win this project. How can we work together to make that happen? And if it doesn't meet our strategy, then I don't have to have that second conversation.
Okay, so Subhash, race to resources, right? Who gets there first and how do we do this? This isn't the first time in economic development or in Missouri we have seen race to resources. Where else have you seen doing economic development for, I won't say how many years. You want to say it? 30 years?
Almost 30.
30 years? You were a pup. You were just a little kid when you started, right? Where else have you seen race to resources, and how is this race different than those races?
So, as you made me share, it's almost 30 years. And so, but the thing is, and when I started, and I think it was actually happening before, the first kind of race was for talent, labor, workforce. We talked about all these opportunities in manufacturing for talent, and how can we get more people into that. And so there is a war for talent, and that's been the case for years. And thanks to your programs at Missouri One Start, we have solutions for that. Some of them are short-term, some of them are mid-term, some of them are long-term. That's been like the slowest race, meaning it's just, I think, stats are showing that there is a lot of interest in manufacturing jobs, and this next generation is taking notice of that. So that's been great. The other one that is a little faster has been things that have yielded things like Etcherland, right? So the exciting, he loves it, by the way. So the idea, which is sites, large industrial sites. we, about 5 years ago, we set out, because of the same problem that Steve outlined, we were not able to pursue these exciting opportunities that were coming across our desk, where they said we need 1,000 acres, we need 200 acres or 500 acres. And we have many small sites, and it surprises a lot of people with a state the size of Missouri that we don't have acreage available, but it's actually difficult to find. And kudos to Steve for his work on securing that acreage. But there has been a race for that. And that has been, so we set out to identify sites. We wanted to control the sites. Again, Steve has done a great job of controlling, because you don't want to have multiple owners on sites. Improve them. Director Hadaway and the General Assembly approved $75 million to improve these sites, which is crucial, so they're ready to go for these attraction projects or expansion projects. And then finally is marketing the sites. But what's been interesting is that we were going to go with identify, control, improve, and market. The interest on these sites have been so high, we haven't had to market. All we have to do is just reply and respond, but this is it. We planned this whole very robust strategy 5 years ago. We're going to do a miniature website. We're going to have social media on the At Your Land mega site, right? Whatever we would do. And we haven't had to do it because the activity has been so intense. And so that would probably be the other race. But this race for electrons, or whatever gigawatts it is, or gigawatts it is, which is a term we didn't know existed until 2 years ago, nothing has happened this quickly.
And I think, Subhash, one of the struggles I've had with the race for electricity is how to solve it, right? And not that any race has been necessarily an easy solve, to your point. Some are slower, some are quicker, right? But there's so many different players and pieces that you just can't go out and talk to a farmer and say, hey, you've got some land and I've got someone that wants to buy it. How do we come to the table and make a deal, right? Yeah. So do you feel like in your almost 30 years of doing economic development, right, do you feel like this race is different?
It is. Like I said, I have not seen anything like it before. You know, that curve of it just shooting up, and it seems like it came out of nowhere. And it's this intersection of, and I don't want to, make any statements about, how we got here, right? But if we're there are electric resources, utility resources that have shifted, and then we've got, again, these data centers and AI that their need seems to be insatiable, and then we've got they're struggling to find people, another race, and so they're automating more. The manufacturers are automating more, and the distribution. I mean, these distribution centers are heavily automated. Amazon is putting intense robots in their distribution centers, and this is moving product. And so that's going to consume electricity. So it's like this perfect storm of some power being retired, and then like AI, which is, I have 4 AI platforms that I use every day. I don't even know that I'm using a couple of them sometimes. But AI and then the manufacturing, this perfect storm of this activity, it's unlike anything I've ever seen.
Yep. Steve, as we talk about the race to resources and the history of what that's been, right? As a local economic developer, and this is something that I like to ask local economic developers all across the state, so I'm curious with your answer. But you have limited land, limited power supply. How do you know what project is the right project to go after? And are you nervous if you go after that data center, for example, right? Or that manufacturing that needs all of this power? Are you missing out on what's to come in the future that could give a $2 billion investment project or 8,000 jobs?
I'll start with the last question first. Nervous would not be the state of mind. I think terrified is probably more realistic, because our goal as an economic development organization is to create a very diverse, strong, resilient economy locally, regionally even. And if you threw all your eggs in one basket, you really have a point of vulnerability there that's really not advisable. So you have to look at every project that comes in and say, does this align with our strategy of what we're trying to do? What is the objective? And if it does, then we look into it a little bit further. But it falls on those organizations to do their due diligence. Yeah, you're selling your community, but you're buying a product. You're buying a company. And you need to understand who it is you're doing business with, and do they have the culture that fits? Do they have the same mindset that the local community does to be successful? We are really blessed in this area. We've got multiple electric providers. And yeah, we're consuming or going to consume an enormous amount for AI and data centers. But I've got a tranche of power that is earmarked for manufacturing. And it used to be, and I joke with our utility providers all the time, it used to be a large project was 5 megawatts. Now it's, in manufacturing, now it's 50 megawatts. But we know that even if we pursue the dreams on the data center and AI, that we still have enough bandwidth there to land a couple of premium manufacturing opportunities to our community. And that's what we're looking at. We're premium. We don't chase everything anymore. We are being very, very selective so we can create a foundation that's strong and resilient. But yeah, it is terrifying when you give all your power away.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with land too, right?
And land,
for that project. Okay, Subhash, we're gonna click back. Grab the clicker for me, and let's go back to your slide on large electricity loads. The needs. Okay, this one, please. Okay, these are non-data centers, which is unbelievable.
Right.
Because as you said, if we added data centers into this, we would need glasses, right? And weigh 10 times the load, right?
Right.
How is Missouri competing on these projects?
It's on these manufacturing projects, it's challenging. The one thing is that it's not like other states are sitting here on a lot of power also, right? So it's how well can we communicate to these companies that we can serve them. And we engage our utility partners, as Steve said. We engage folks, they engage MISO on these issues too. So the one thing that we have going for us is also, they are also aware of the challenges of power, and the time frame for that power is another story also. So there are some scenarios where we have approached these projects, and they've given us an extreme amount of power, and we know off the top of our head that we cannot serve it. But we still pursued it because we think another state is also probably going to fail on this. And they're going to change their strategy and go back and say, you know what, our time may not be 27, it might be 28 or 29. Because when we're dealing with these companies, they're not, and I'm going to, again, go back to just manufacturers. These manufacturers, they don't do this every day. They'll do something like this maybe once. Some of them will do it regularly, but some of them, it's the first time they've dealt with it. There's a lot of kind of learning curve on their side. So we try to bank on the fact that they may not know exactly what they're looking for and they don't need it right this minute. Can we ramp it up? And we still proceed until we're told you're out.
Have we lost projects in Missouri because we couldn't meet the large electricity need?
I feel like you want me to cry after 30 years of economic development. Yes, unfortunately we have. We have, and what's tough is, and again, we're a very aggressive organization. Our job is to go out and attract companies to the state, and all parts of the state. And so we have had many scenarios where we've had projects where we've come in we were in first place, and then because of the power, we could not advance, and then we get eliminated, and another state wins. And it's tough. Some of these things, you spend 18 months on some of these, and it's tough to lose them, but it does happen. The other thing, again, we're an aggressive organization, and we want to pursue all opportunities. And so we've been approached by companies that say, all right, this is the electric load. And it's so against our DNA to say we just can't go after it, right? That's so against what we do. We're not used to this, right? Everyone we go after, because Steve can be selective, and he should be, but we have an entire state. There are some parts of the state that would love the project that another part of the state would not necessarily be ideal for. So we have a lot of diversity in the state where we can pursue something. In fact, it's become such a challenge, we've also adjusted a strategy a little bit, and we're trying to target some smaller projects also. We have a method of targeting companies, and we've adjusted it to where a smaller project is also a really viable one for us too, and we're pursuing those proactively so that we can win with smaller loads and smaller job counts.
Which we've done for years as kind of our bread and butter, right? So kind of go all in on where we know we have the resources, right?
I mean, admittedly, right, we were, attraction, we go after the big shiny, right, object. That's some of these projects that we're talking about, and we are working these. But it's also important to look at some of the smaller ones, more manageable ones. And frankly, when we get one of these, it's only 5 megawatts, which again, a few years ago was a lot of power. We're thrilled because we're like, okay, I think we can handle this.
I mean, I remember working a project a few years ago that was 5 megawatts that we lost because we couldn't meet that. So, I mean, to your point with the change in it. Okay, Mason, what role do you see for the emerging technologies like advanced nuclear, hydrogen, or long duration storage in meeting these future demands?
Yeah, no, to use one of the quotes from our senior executives, Aubrey Johnson, who's our Vice President of Transmission Plan, the grid's hungry. And so as a grid operator and transmission planner, we will take any sort of fuel mix and asset that our member utilities decide is the best fit for their fuel mix and their generation fleet. And that's, of course, in partnership with their state regulatory entities, which has the primacy on resource adequacy. We're not a resource adequacy planner, but there are some, tweaks to our markets that we have made, especially resource accreditation. We use a bunch of buzzwords. Firm dispatchable thermal assets are always our operators' best friends. Those assets are very much welcome to the grid, along with wind and solar and intermittent renewables. Those are as well. Hydrogen is fairly new to the resource mix, but we're seeing that expansion and interest in that fuel mix as well expand rapidly. So we need to serve power. Folks want to come home, they want to flip their switch, and the lights come on. And so really an all-above energy strategy is what we see from most of our member utilities and generation owners within the footprint. And we welcome any generation assets, and we'll be able to manage through this energy transition.
Awesome. I think, as Subhash said, we don't like to say no. I also don't like to end on a negative note for, especially as, our job is talking about what Missouri can do in economic development. So Subhash, take us home. Earn your keep today, right? You sell Missouri, right? We know we need more power. We know that entities like, DNR, the Public Service Commission, all of our power partners across the state are all aware of this and working on solutions. Where else is Missouri doing really well when it comes to attraction and business in general?
Let me start with one thing that you just said, right? The phenomenal, Governor Parson was a phenomenal individual we worked with. Governor Kehoe has been excellent. It's brand new. Both governors have brought in cabinet members to help sell the state. That is so incredibly important to have people from DNR, Department of Revenue, Department of Economic Development, of course, right, Department of Transportation. Having these individuals come together, it is something that sets us apart. And we've got to work hard, right? In Missouri, we've got to work hard. And that's what we do. And so I've got to say kudos to the administration for mobilizing cabinet members on these projects. So I have like 90 slides on this topic alone, as you can probably imagine, so just in a couple minutes.
Mason, is that more than what you guys do? Okay, just wondering.
Yeah. So just really quickly, I mean, some of the best things about Missouri when it comes to an attraction standpoint is we have one of the most diverse economies in the country. And you might think, why is that important? Well, we don't have massive declines when there's economic downturns nationally, and we don't have skyrocketing economies either. This very steady economic climate is what companies are looking for. When they put $1 billion in the ground, they're looking for a stable environment to do that. Similarly, we have a AAA bond rating, and we've had that for over 50 years, and we've had it from all 3 credit rating agencies. Not terribly exciting, but it is very important for some of these companies when they're investing these kind of dollars. It's like having you want to build a house on a strong foundation. Missouri provides that strong foundation. Industry-wise, right, we are excelling in so many industries. We can't have the most diverse economy without having strengths in manufacturing. We are building the world's most advanced fighter jets, top-selling vehicles in automotive, so aerospace, defense, automotive, food processing, agriculture. We do a lot in construction materials. And then distribution centers, we're in the middle of the country. We do very well with those. And so our sort of lower cost profile is part of our value proposition. But on top of those kind of legacy industries, there are a lot of emerging industries, animal health, right? We've got MUR here. We have plant sciences on the eastern half of the state, geospatial. So some of these newer emerging industries, no other state can claim those kind of strengths. Manufacturing, yes, other states have it. Distribution, other states have it. Nobody else can hit those emerging industries like we can. So I can go on for another 3 days if you like, but honestly, we're doing really, really well. I would encourage everybody to take a look at the Missouri Partnership website. I promise you there's something there. I don't care how long you've lived in Missouri, you'll find something about the state that you didn't know.
No, thank you, Subhash. I think that's a perfect wrap up for where we are doing really well as a state, but in order to still compete, in order to be able to continue to win, we have to be able to provide the necessary power that's needed for these projects in order to stay competitive. And I always use the example of, hey, if I have a manufacturing facility that needs a road, I can work with MoDOT. We can build a road and have a road up in a month. Steve Etcher might be able to build it a little bit quicker, but unfortunately, to get the power size that we need and the capacity that's needed in order to compete on these projects, it's not a month turnaround on this. So again, appreciate the Department of Natural Resources, appreciate all of our partners, the PSC, everybody across the state that's working on trying to solve this so that Missouri can still compete and be competitive. So thank you guys. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.